Hi, I'm Tony and I'm a senior asbestos consultant for Chem Safety. Hopefully we can help you make an informed decision around the type of survey you might require and what to expect from that survey. So the decision as to which survey you need to be informed by several factors. These will include legislative requirements, worker health and safety requirements, and contractor requirements. So contractor requirements, that would mean that often contractors are going to require an asbestos survey or testing done before they start any works. It's a legislative requirement as well. So as far as legislative requirements go, I'll briefly touch on some of these. You could Google any of this and bring up lots and lots of asbestos legislation, so I won't bore you with all of that. So the main points would include the Health and Safety at Work Act of 2015 and the Health and Safety at Work Asbestos Regulations of 2016. And these indicate that PCBU's duties include ensuring that exposure to airborne asbestos is eliminated as far as reasonably practicable. Interesting with that. And where it's not reasonably practical, the PCBU must minimise exposure so far as reasonably practical. So, and that's only going to be able to happen if we know where the asbestos is, what sort of asbestos is, the extent and friability, and if friability being a measure of how easily the material breaks down and releases fibres. And so we also people would want to know the condition and the likelihood of disturbance. And that information should be made available to workers and subcontractors, tenants, etc., etc. So aside from the date of building manufacture, other factors may apply. For example, generally speaking, a glass house, a versatile type garage, or a tin shed are unlikely to contain asbestos, and a survey might not be required for these sorts of things. Additionally, an owner-occupied home with no work to be carried out, that they don't require a survey either. There are a few ways to go about surveying. So the worksafe suggests that you could assume that your building or workplace contains asbestos and write your plan accordingly. However, that would mean that every time prior to work being carried out, an inspection or possibly sampling would need to be undertaken. You could follow the guidance in the worksafe approved code of practice, and that would work again. But I would suggest that the cost of getting it wrong may well outweigh any potential savings. You could choose to get your staff trained to recognise potential asbestos, and that's good, and that training is always a good thing. However, I would suggest that to get a thorough survey and experienced surveyor is required. You could employ a professional surveyor, not that I'm biased, to assess your building and produce your plan. So the types of surveys. So there's three main types of surveys, and each one of them should ideally identify all the asbestos or potential asbestos containing materials in the building. And the three categories of asbestos surveys include a management survey, and these range from presumptive surveys where you're just having a look around at low end to the high end management surveys where destructive and intrusive sampling takes place. A refurbishment survey, typically carried out prior to refurbishment or repairs, and demolition surveys, as the name implies, these are carried out prior to undertaking some demolition. So the results and information from a management survey or refurbishment survey in the workplace should be used to inform the management plan, and that lets you manage the asbestos in your building ongoing. You know where it is and how much it is and know not to disturb it. So I'd like to talk about a management survey to begin with. So that typically going to identify materials for the management plan. And they can include at the lower end of the scale presumptive survey. And this is where you don't take any samples, and potential asbestos containing materials are presumed to contain asbestos. And it's not our preferred survey type, but it's useful in situations where suspected materials are in good condition and sampling is likely to cause unacceptable damage, like new flooring, etc., etc. A standard management survey, so our standard management survey, is likely to include sampling of materials such as cement boards, soffits, older vinyl floor coverings, plaster stopping compound from walls or ceilings where there's pre-existing damage, so cracks, things like that. Often in a management survey, though, we can take samples from discrete areas and we'll cover them up and you hardly even know we've taken a sample. We're also commonly engaged to carry out high-level management surveys prior to undertaking a complete refurbishment or demolition survey. So we'll do this where we can't get into a full refurbishment or demolition survey due to factors including like the building's still inhabited, it's electrically live, or a soft strip needs to occur before we can go in and find out the rest of the material. So these high-level management surveys are a helpful indicator of the asbestos present in the building, but they don't meet the requirements for a full refurbishment or demolition survey. So we'll talk about refurbishment surveys now. So a refurbishment survey, like a management survey, is used to inform the management plan for ongoing management. However, the primary purpose of a refurbishment survey is to identify all potential asbestos-containing materials prior to undertaking refurbishment works. So with a refurbishment survey, typically we discuss the scope of works with the client. Ideally, at that point, we're getting a marked up site plan so we can see what's happening and where it's happening and what we need to check. And all the potentially asbestos-containing materials we try and identify and sample all of them prior to refurb. So this often involves fairly destructive sampling techniques, and ideally, again, the area should be uninhabited and electrically disconnected. So where asbestos has been identified in a refurb survey, the survey can be used to inform the contractor or removalist of the location, friability and amount of material to be removed. And that allows the removalist or builder or contractor to give an accurate price for the removal, and it avoids extra costs and delays associated with removal. You don't want to find material halfway through a renovation. So unfortunately, it's still reasonably common for us to be engaged to carry out an asbestos contamination assessment, so air testing, swab sampling, the whole 9 yards, after flooring, wall linings or damaged ceilings have been disturbed during renovations and repair works. And aside from the obvious health risks of this and the financial costs and the disruption of the program, asbestos contamination never seems to improve the client-contractor relationships very much. So, we'll talk about demolition surveys now. So demolition surveys are typically carried out, as the name implies, prior to demolition. And a good survey, as far as that goes, should identify as far as possible all the asbestos on site. So saying that, materials below ground, inside concrete slabs, or in the interior of ductwork can be inaccessible even to the most determined surveyor. Again, this is where good site plans come in real handy. As with a refurbishment survey, the building will have to be electrically disconnected and unoccupied. It's just for health and safety reasons. The demolition survey will include destructive investigations of areas of walls, ceilings, floor linings. So you're going to expect significant damage from a demolition survey. That's all good because you can demo. It should be noted that a demolition survey may take place over multiple days, so that the initial sample analysis results can be used to inform additional sampling requirements. So ideally, we don't go through an asbestos-containing material to find another asbestos-containing material. We like to get some results first sometimes. So where a less than thorough demolition survey has been undertaken, often additional materials are identified, and that happens during a demo phase, and stopping works to complete asbestos removal can seriously affect the timeline. So it's another situation where a little more time at the beginning of the project to gain a good understanding of the asbestos on site can make a significant difference to the project timeline. So we're often called out to survey homes prior to a jack and pack. That's been Christchurch, and jack and pack house relift and relevel. So in this situation, we carry out a management survey with sampling typically of plaster stopping compounded walls and ceilings, where releveling is likely to cause cracking, damage that needs repairing. And often we'll also sample vinyl flooring, sort of thing, where they need to cut holes for underfloor access. Again, sensibly labelled site plans can make a real difference to the contractors on site and things. They get our report, they can understand that, they know where material's been found and where it isn't. Yeah, so in summary, a management survey typically used to meet the requirements of the legislation, and a refurbishment survey is typically undertaken prior to undertaking renovations or repairs. And demolition surveys, again, as the name implies, prior to demolition. Yeah. So, any questions? Cool. Am I not seeing them? Oh. So there's a question up here that says, can you do a demolition survey while the building's fully occupied? Not really. No, because the building's not going to be fit for occupation by the time we're finished. But it'd need to be electrically dead and ideally unoccupied. So we don't commonly carry out demolition surveys when the place is occupied. The other question here is, why can't we do a demolition survey if it's the best survey? Again, if the building's occupied and you want to live in a house with holes in the wall, no, we can't. The next question is, I don't want any visible damage to the buildings, so what can I do? Well, we can undertake a presumptive survey, but that means everything that could have asbestos in it is presumed to have asbestos in it. That's less than ideal. So we don't often do presumptive surveys. So the next one we got here is we're only working on a small part of the building. Do we have to get the building whole building surveyed? And the answer to that is not particularly, no. You can. A management survey is required for legislation. A management surveys might be required to meet your legislative requirements. But if you're doing refurb, then we typically only need to investigate the areas where damage is going to be occurring. So yeah, any other questions? Oh, I've got a whole bunch here. Why do I have to get every ceiling tested? So stippled ceilings, they don't have, they're not a homogeneous material. So you might find that your stippled ceiling looks the same throughout the house, but it might have asbestos in one ceiling and not the other. So that's typically why we will sample that in multiple rooms. How quickly can you tell me the results? We've got a IANZ accredited lab, and typically the actual results they'll come through within 24 hours, but it might take a while longer for the report to come out to you. And the results by themselves they don't always tell the full story. Here's one. Do you repair any damage? No, we'll tape up areas or make them safe so that there's no asbestos being released into the air, but we don't carry out repairs. Do I have to go into a roof space? Ideally, we will go into a roof space, especially in an industrial or commercial building, because the roof space and underfloor spaces are the areas where there's likely to be the most asbestos, or at least in friable condition. So ideally, we'll get into the roof and underfloor voids. This one says, I'm purchasing a house and want to find out if it has asbestos. What can I do? I'd talk to the homeowner about it would be the starting point, because we can't sample somebody's house without their permission. So if you can get permission from the homeowner, we can certainly come and do some samples, but note that sampling will cause some damage, so the homeowner might be less than thrilled. All right. Would you survey sheds and outbuildings, etc.? So yeah, sometimes we do. Some things, it depends on the outbuilding. If it's made out of cement, we'll definitely sample it. Things like tin sheds and that, we can have a look around. If we're doing a house or a building, we'll have a look, make sure there's no asbestos in there. But yeah, it's sort of a case-by-case basis. On here, can I drop off a sample to you guys instead of getting a survey? You could drop off a sample to us. We're happy to analyse samples, but sample result is not the same as a survey. So that won't tell you. It might tell you if the material's got asbestos in it, but it won't tell you much else about the rest of the house. It won't meet your legislative requirements for management survey either. Am I at risk of asbestos exposure if you do a survey in my house? No, that's the short answer. You'll see us wearing our masks and stuff. That's because we do it on a daily basis, and health and safety reasons. But the methodology we use means that anyone in the home is unlikely to be exposed to any sort of asbestos. Oh, and yeah, obviously we leave it pretty clean afterwards and seal up any sample points. So the next question will be, what do you mean by homogeneous material? So some materials have got an even amount of asbestos spread throughout them. So manufactured materials like gaskets and things, they're going to have a fairly consistent amount of asbestos throughout them. Things like plaster stopping compound, textured plaster ceilings, and that they may well have not been mixed thoroughly at the beginning. So you'll find that some areas will have asbestos in it and some not at all. Got another one here. how long would a survey of a standard house take? Typically less than a day. So it depends on a standard house, 3-bedroom house, somewhere around 4 hours on site, depending on how many samples we have to take. What's the best way to contact us? What do I need to provide? So bring admin at Chem Safety and let them know. And ideally what you need to provide is some site plans. We're pretty happy with site plans and a scope of the work you want carried out. If it's a refurbishment or even a site plans is a good start. Are there any other questions? Oh yeah, feel free to email us through any more questions and we'll try and get to them pretty soon. Cheers. Oh yeah, thanks so much for attending.